This is Mrs. Jinx, and I'm going to read Flat Stanley by Jeff Brown, pictures by Scott Nash. And I will read one chapter of video, and we have a Flat Stanley project to go with our story. So here we go. Table of Contents, Chapter 1, The Big Bulletin Board. Chapter 2, Being Flat. Chapter 3, Stanley the Kite. Chapter 4, The Museum Thieves. And Chapter 5, Arthur's Good Idea. Let's find out what happens. Chapter 1, The Big Bulletin Board. Breakfast was ready. "I will go wake the boys," Mrs. Lambchop said to her husband, George Lambchop. Just then, their younger son, Arthur, called from the bedroom he shared with his brother Stanley. "Hey! Come and look! Hey!" Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop were both very much in favor of politeness and careful speech. "Hay is for horses, Arthur, not people," Mr. Lambchop said as they entered the bedroom. "Try to remember that." "Excuse me," Arthur said, "but look!" He pointed to Stanley's bed. Across it lay the enormous bulletin board that Mr. Lambchop had given the boys a Christmas ago so that they could pin up pictures and messages and maps. It had fallen during the night on top of Stanley. Oh, no! Whew, but Stanley was not hurt. In fact, he would still have been sleeping if he had not been woken by his brother's shouts. "What's going on here?" he called out cheerfully from beneath the enormous board. Oh, let's look just at the illustration to see what happened. Oh, my golly. The board definitely did fall on Stanley, didn't it? Does he know it? Does he know that he's flat? I don't think so. Let's find out what happens next. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop hurried to lift it from the bed. "Heavens," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Gosh," said Arthur, "Stanley's flat." "As a pancake," said Mr. Lambchop. "Darndest thing I've ever seen." "Let's have breakfast," said Mrs. Lambchop, "and then Stanley and I will go see Dr. Dan and hear what he has to say." I wonder what Dr. Dan has to say. Let's find out. In his office, Dr. Dan examined Stanley all over. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Does it hurt very much?" "I felt sort of tickly for a while after I got up," Stanley Lambchop said, "but I feel fine now." There's the doctor, Mom, and Stanley. Look how flat Stanley is. He looks healthy, though, doesn't he? "Well, that's mostly how it is with these cases," said Dr. Dan. "We'll just have to keep an eye on this young fellow," he said when he had finished the examination. "Sometimes we doctors, despite all our years of training and experience, can only marvel at how little we really know." So even the doctor doesn't know what's going on. Let's find out what happens. Mrs. Lambchop said she thought Stanley's clothes would have to be altered by the tailor now. A tailor is a person who makes clothes. So Dr. Dan told his nurse to take Stanley's measurements. Mrs. Lambchop wrote them down. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and half an inch thick. And I see the measuring ruler. It's on his arms. How silly is that?